Hello class, welcome to Lab 3, Segment 8, and in this segment we're going to take a look at how you can bring external file data into a Python program, which can then allow you to perform operations on it, whatever those operations might be. So that's going to be the main focus for this particular segment. And in the project that you've been given some starter code that's going to contain this function called importCSV. So hopefully you remember how to actually tell a function to run and to get some value back from it. But the way that the importCSV function is going to work is you're going to have something set up like this. So something like what's on line 10 here, where you have some variable name is equal to importCSV, and then here you'll give it the name of the file that you actually want it to read in. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about CSV files. So let's actually go ahead and take a look at this. So example.csv, that's just the example that I'm using here. And if I want to, I can actually go ahead and just open this in a spreadsheet program, whatever that might be. Thanks for the notice, but I'm not interested in installing updates. So you can see this is pretty much like a spreadsheet file. That's basically what a CSV file is. And I'll just keep that on the right-hand side of the screen here. And if we want to, we can actually go ahead and take a look at the contents of the file by going into a text editor. So you can see that's what the contents actually look like. And you can see how each line within the CSV file corresponds to a row in the spreadsheet document that we have here. So you see the first row begins with hour, then the next row begins with 0, and then finally the last row ends with 23. So you can see each individual row is separated by a line, and the columns here are separated by commas. So you can see this would be the first column, and then the next column over would be temperature space capital F, which corresponds to the next column, and then same thing with relative humidity, and then same thing with wind. So you can see each item that's separated by commas corresponds to a column, and each item that's on its own line corresponds to a particular row. So that's essentially what this function does. Is if this first bit on line 3 here splits everything up by row and puts that in an own separate list, and then what happens here on line 5 is it goes through each individual row and then splits all the items in the rows into columns. So essentially what this does is you pass the file name to this importCSV function, it opens the file and converts that spreadsheet into a two-dimensional Python list. And then the return statement gives you back that Python list. So the setup should allow us to open this file called example.csv, get the resulting two-dimensional list and put it in our variable called example. And then here I'm just going to simply tell the program to print out whatever example is. So if all goes well, we should see a two-dimensional list appear in the Python console. So I'll go ahead and run that. You can see we do get something that looks like a list here. And the way we can tell it's two-dimensional is if we look at the very beginning, you can see we have two open brackets. That two open brackets does in fact tell us that it is a two-dimensional list. And something else that's really important to notice when we take a look at what's contained within this list is you'll notice that every single entry in the list, including all the numbers, are surrounded by quotation marks. Remember, anything that's surrounded by quotation marks means that that item or that value is being treated as a textual item. Even though we can see with our human eyes that these are in fact numbers, the computer is going to be treating those as a textual item. So when you read in the data sets as part of your project, the first order of business you probably want to address is converting all the appropriate values into numerical values so that you can then do math with them. Because if you try to do math with it as it is right now, you're not going to get the results that you really want. So just sort of a heads up. And then one other important thing that I should point out is here this program that's accessing the CSV file is called s8.py, and the name of the file itself that we're reading in is called example.csv. It's very important, in order to avoid confusion, it's very important that those two files, the Python file and the CSV file, so this is the Python file, what I have selected right here, this is the CSV file. Very important that those two files are in the same folder. If they are not, you are going to be wildly confused. You are going to get an error message over and over again, and then there may or may not be a lot of frustration and sadness involved from there on out. So just make sure your CSV file and the Python file trying to access the CSV file, in this case s8.py, make sure those two things are in the same folder. Otherwise, this is not going to work at all. I know computers are very picky, but unfortunately that's just kind of the caveat that we have to deal with when we work with computers. So that's going to do it for this segment. Again, just to summarize import CSV, you give it a file name, it gives you back a two-dimensional list as if it were a spreadsheet. That's essentially all it does. But that's going to do it for this segment. And in the next segment, we're going to talk a little bit about the matplotlib module and specifically look at a function that you'll need to make use of to complete the project. So with that, I will see you all in the next segment.